Ma'am, in Babita,
Yeah. So now we can talk about what is the crux of the matter in Babita Punia.
yes, ma'am. मैम इसके क्रक्स के बारे में बात करने से पहले सेक्शन 12 के बारे में बात करना बहुत ज़रूरी है ऑफ आर्मी एक्ट ऑफ 1950 जो कि प्रोहिबिट करता था वुमेन के रिक्रूटमेंट के एक्सपेक्ट इन द केस ऑफ लाइक मेडिकल
सेक्शन
सर्विसेज
12, सेक्शन 12 आर्मी एक्ट 1950 का बेस कहाँ है? हाउ इट इज जस्टिफाइड इन द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन? It says no discrimination on the basis of sex.
आई थिंक मैम इट इज़ अंडर आर्टिकल there is one article ma'am in our
Now we
constitution the
need to
prop
identify that, now, because only then the fuzzy constitutionality of the legislation itself. Which article in the constitution says that central government can make laws prohibiting women from joining the armed forces?
wait ma'am let me जस्ट गिव मी वन मोमेंट मैम आर्टिकल 33 मैम वो कहता है कि रीजनेबल रिस्ट्रिक्शन लगाया जा सकता है फंडामेंटल राइट्स पे इन आर्म फोर्सेस ओनली
Right. So that is the source of the discrimination which has resulted. The constitution itself says so. So it gives.
यस मैम
Does it give complete discretion, or are there any limitations on that discretion?
नो मैम लिमिटेशन है जैसा कि जस्टिस चंद्रचूड़ ने कहा था कि मतलब ये
आर्टिकल पढ़ो
डिसिप्लिन
पहले, आर्टिकल पढ़ो पहले पूरा.
ओके मैम Article 33 says power of parliament to modify the rights confirmed by this part in their application etc parliament may by law determine to what extent any
etc.
of the rights
Is etc.
etc sorry
Mhm.
yeah etc parliament may by law determine to what extent any of the rights confirmed by this part shall in their application to 33 clause a the member of the armed force or the b the member of the force charged with the maintenance of the public order or 33 clause c person employed in any of the bureau or other organizations established by the state for the purpose of intelligence or counterintelligence or section D, the person employed in or in connection with the telecommunication system set up for the purpose of any armed force, bureau, or organization referred to in clause A to C be restricted to be abrogated so as to be ensure the proper discharge of their duties and the maintenance of the discipline among them.
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
So,
pursuant to this power, they got this legislation, the Armed Forces Act, the Air Force Act, the Navy Act, which says no
yes,
woman can be employed there. So, what is the
except in
rationale? What is the argument of the state? Why would women be not permitted in armed forces, and what were the exceptions made? So that's one question. But what is the context of this Supreme Court case? Why has it come to the Supreme Court? What happened before that?
Ma'am, the issue has started from the notification in 1992 when central governments allows the women in certain
Okay,
cadres
hold
like
on,
intelligence.
hold on.
Okay.
Okay, yes, continue.
Yes, ma'am. तो इशू स्टार्ट होती है और 1992 से, जब सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट जो है वो वुमेन को अलाउ करता है लाइक अदर देन मेडिकल, डेंटल और नर्सिंग सर्विसेज के अलावा एसएसी शॉर्ट सर्विस कमीशन वो बनाता है और वुमेन को अलाउ करता है इंटेलिजेंस क्रॉप्स के लिए, क्रॉप्स ऑफ सिग्नल के लिए, एजुकेशनल कॉप्स के लिए एंड द जजेज एडवोकेट जर्नल डिपार्टमेंट के लिए अलाउ करता है कि वुमेन कैन लाइक
It was open to more than, initially it was only 3 areas where women could have been absorbed. Then it was open to another 10 or so areas.
राइट मैम।
Hmm.
सो उसके बाद 2003 में बबीता पूनिया जो हैं वो एक रिट पिटीशन फाइल करती हैं कि ये जो लॉ है वो डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी है वुमेन के लिए, और वो डिमांड करती है कि परमानेंट कमीशन जो है वो मतलब मेल मेंबर ऑफिसर जो होते हैं उसके बराबरी में वुमेन का भी परमानेंट कमीशन होना चाहिए, क्योंकि ये शॉर्ट सर्विस था, ये परमानेंट जॉब नहीं थी। और
They were
उसके बाद
permitted only for short service commission. Up to how many years they could work?
मैक्सिमम ऑफ 14 ईयर मैम,
Mm-hmm. Possible extension?
वाज 14 ईयर।
उसमें कुछ में था ना, I think later on some extension was possible for 20 years. And in some cases, they were then after 20 years, they were entitled to some pension. But the ordinary principle was 14 years. That
यस
after
मैम, यस।
14 years, they have to leave their service.
इन 2006 के नोटिफिकेशन में फिर ये अलाउ किया गया था कि वुमेन जो है उनको पेंशन्स ईटीसी एक्सेट्रा के लिए वो हो सकता है। उसके बाद 2 रीट पिटीशन और फाइल किया जाता है, एक लीला गौरव की मेजर लीला गौरव करते हैं, और एक है जो लेफ्टिनेंट कर्नल सीमा सिंह जो है वो सेम इश्यूज को लेकर के पिटीशन जो है हाई कोर्ट में फाइल करते हैं। फिर
कौन से हाई कोर्ट
2010
में?
में दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट मैम।
हम्म,
2010 में दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट जो है ये सारे मैटर्स को एक साथ क्लब कर देता है और डिफेंस को और सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट को डायरेक्शंस देता है कि परमानेंट कमीशन बनाया जाए एसएससी ऑफिसर जो है, वुमेन ऑफिसर जो है एयर आर्मी, एयर सर्विसेज और आर्मी के लिए जो ऑप्ट करती हैं और जिनको ग्रांट नहीं किया गया है। फिर आर्मी ऑफिसर जो है सेम जजमेंट को जो है वो सुप्रीम कोर्ट में चैलेंज करते हैं, और फिर सुप्रीम कोर्ट जो है वो पिटीशन जो है वो रिफ्यूज कर देती है, और जो ऑर्डर हाई कोर्ट के थ्रू दिया जाता है उसको डायरेक्ट करती है कि इसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन होना चाहिए। 2018 में सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट जो है वो सुप्रीम कोर्ट को कहती है कि वी आर कंसिडरिंग टू ग्रांटिंग द परमानेंट कमीशन टू द वुमेन रिक्रूटेड थ्रू द एसएससी इन आर्मी। फिर 2019 में जो है गवर्नमेंट जो है वो गाइडलाइन इशू करती है कि परमानेंट कमीशन विल बी ग्रांटेड टू द वुमेन ऑफिसर बट फ्रॉम प्रोस्पेक्टिवली नॉट रेट्रोस्पेक्टिवली। बट इसमें जो आर्ग्यूमेंट्स दिए गए थे मैम गवर्नमेंट के थ्रू, आई थिंक वो उस पर डिस्कशन करना ज़्यादा मतलब हमारे लिए बेनिफिशियल
yeah, what
होगा।
were the reasons? Why did they say we will not give it to them?
यस मैम।
Hmm.
जो फर्स्ट आर्ग्यूमेंट इनका था कि वुमेन को परमानेंट इसलिए नहीं करना चाहिए क्योंकि मैटरनिटी इश्यूज एंड चाइल्ड केयर इश्यूज आर लाइक कनेक्टेड टू वुमेन। सो
Mhm.
वो एक है, और दूसरा आर्गुमेंट उनका था कि इट विल डिस्टर्ब द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ द आर्मी, व्हिच आई टोटली
Mhm.
एग्री विद देम। दे विल डिस्टर्ब द structure of the army, the patriarchal structure in the army. So I do agree with them. And उसके अलावा फिर इनका contention था to manage women in the soft position, which will require infrastructure involving hazardous works with the regular post with the other women in the station. तो ये काफी ज्यादा उनके लिए होगा। तो I think we can discuss on all these things.
Yeah, so let's look at that para, na, where they've listed out the government stereotyping. I think 54 or something is the para where the judge has
Para
listed
53.
out 53. So 52 onwards, if you read, it's very interesting reading. Yeah, 53. 70 years stereotypes and women in the armed forces. 70 years after the birth of post-colonial independent state, there is still a need for change in attitudes and mindsets to recognize the commitment to the values of the Constitution. This is evident from the submissions, which were placed as a part of the record of this court. Repeatedly in the course of the submission, this court has been informed that, please read.
Part E 1. The
No,
profession.
listen, this part E and part A, which are appearing, these are
Oh,
part of
oh,
the, what you call that as, uh, not footnote. The header and the
oh,
footer is
oh,
part
oh,
of the
okay,
footer, which is
okay.
constantly appearing in between.
So, repeatedly in the course of the submissions, this court has been informed that 1. The profession of arms is a way of life which requires sacrifice and commitment beyond the call of duty. 2. Women officers must deal with pregnancy, motherhood, and domestic obligations towards their children and families, and may not be well suited to the life of a soldier in the armed force. 3. A soldier must have the physical capability to engage in combat, and inherent in the physiological differences between men and women is the lowering of standards applicable to women. 4. An all-male environment in a unit would require moderated behavior in the presence of women officers. 5. The physiological limitations of women officers are accentuated by challenges of confinement, motherhood, and childcare. And 7th, the deployment of women officers is not advisable in areas where members of the armed forces are confronted with minimal facility for habitat and hygiene.
Okay. So, what is the answer to the stereotypical images presented by the government? What
Hmm.
are the women lawyers and the armed force, the women officers are saying?
Then the petitioners have contended that they say that the conditions are hazardous, the conditions are not very good. They've presented that almost 30% of the women officers that are there in the SSC, Short Service Commissions,
For those
are
14
already
years, the 14
uh,
years that they work, they are posted in the similar situations.
in these conditions. And
So, if
also
they
they
can,
say that
if they
uh,
can bear it for 14 years,
hmm,
they can certainly bear it for the rest of their lives. Their
no, it
army life, I'm saying.
Yeah, many people think that it was a case where women officers were there were no women soldiers prior to this case, and now the
Mm-hmm.
Supreme Court has allowed women as officers as combat soldiers. So this was not the case. Women were there
Mm-hmm.
in short selection commissions. This means that they were not permanent; they were for 14 terms ad hoc basis, but they were posted in difficult conditions. They were in combat roles also.
Mm-hmm.
So this was only to make them permanent as the other male counterparts.
Yeah, we need to reach paragraph 54 also.
Hmm.
This is the response of the Supreme Court.
Supreme.
Yeah.
The submissions advanced in the note tendered to this court are based on sex stereotypes, premised on assumptions about socially ascribed roles of gender which discriminate against women. Underlying the statement that it is a great challenge for women officers to meet the hazards of service owing to their prolonged absence during pregnancy, motherhood, and domestic obligations towards their children and families is a strong stereotype which assumes that domestic obligations rest solely on women. Reliance on the inherent physiological differences between men and women rests in a deeply entrenched, stereotypical, and constitutionally flawed notion that women are the weaker sex and may not undertake tasks that are too arduous for them. Arguments founded on the physical strengths and weaknesses of men and women and on assumptions about women in the social context of marriage and family do not constitute a constitutionally valid basis for denying equal opportunity to women officers. To deny the grant of permanent commissions to women officers on the ground that this would upset the peculiar dynamics in a unit casts an undue burden on women officers, which has been claimed as a ground for excluding women. The written note also relies on the minimal facilities for habitat and hygiene as a ground for suggesting that women officers in the services must not be deployed in the conflict zones. The respondents have placed on record that 30% of the total women officers are in fact disputed to conflict zones.
So once we have this, 55, 56 also. If not, those of you who have not read, these are the very important paras in this judgment. These assertions which have we have extracted broadly from the written submissions which have been intended before this court only go to emphasize the need for change in mindsets to bring about true equality in the army. If society holds strong beliefs about gender roles that men are socially dominant, physically powerful, and the breadwinners of the family, and that women are weak and physically submissive and primarily caretakers confined to a domestic atmosphere, it is unlikely that there would be a change in mindset. Confronted on the one hand with a solemn policy decision taken by the Union government allowing for the grant of PC to women SSC officers in 10 streams, we have yet, on the other hand, a whole baseless line of submissions solemnly made to this court to detract from the vital role that has been played by women short service commission officers in the line of duty. Then they have listed out number of uh, women officers' achievements to show that this is a long distance. So what happened at the so for us, one to understand how do we understand the government's position on this issue. That's one. But second one, no, among us, how do we feel about this whole question about policy decision, which says is the realm of the government? The court should decide on the issues of judicial interpretation. So whether in this case judges have gone beyond the sphere of their access activity or whether they were correct. So how have the whole issue been resolved? What are the directions of the court in this case? One was the whole issue of non-compliance of the Delhi High Court order. So for 10 long years, nothing has been done. Just 1 second. I have to take this call. This is about my deputation. No dues. um, yeah, so one is that if the government, no, what is it that we have achieved by this judgment by the Supreme Court at the end of the day?
Ma'am, the order of the Delhi High Court saying that women officers in the SSC they must be granted permanent commissions. That was upheld by the Supreme Court.
Okay, so this has not expanded the scope of the 10 options which were given to them. Women are still confined in those areas only. And one of the important things which was pointed out was also that even though SSC women officers were available for jobs which were lying vacant in senior officers category, they were not given those jobs. But men who had retired from army, they were given those jobs. So retired men were seen to be doing their jobs better than these women who were younger and had already done human service for 14 years in the army. So that was very apparently gender-based discrimination. So this whole argument that women cannot know if what will happen to them if they get captured, how no their physical force. So all that has been already answered by reference to the 30% postings which have already been seen. So certainly they are. So the further question is that should now whether this case allows us to argue that all areas of armed forces be made available, should be made open to women officers. What are the, and then there was also a question that can women be the commanding officers? Can women be commanding male troops? What is the submission by the women officers to that? Very interesting case, very interesting case, and the range of aspects which have been dealt with in the matter is fascinating. And it's one of those rare cases where the judges are challenging the stereotypical images created as to what a soldier should be. And also, this can relate back to our reading when we said living with contradictions. So at one time we say women want peace, they want to connect with others, they are all for love, care, and affection, and army is not all about that. So that's one angle to the conversation. But the second one is that what they are saying is practical ground reality, that we already are doing that. So what about the commanding position? One of the suggestions was also that all the branches do not require commanding troops. So to say en bloc that they cannot be commanding position, they may be, but there were certain areas where there are no troops, but there should be still, they can still be in the commanding position. And also, I think we need to kind of break open. As I said, men will have to curtail their behavior. What's wrong about it? They will have to be not swearing. They should not be backslapping. They should not be doing, a lot of uncivilized behavior they have among themselves. So nothing of that is wrong as such. And I did share this earlier that I had met a captain in the army, a very petite woman, barely 5 feet, even not even 5 feet, and she was the commanding officer. So when we look around, and it has been pointed out that only 3 countries, I think they've listed out, where all this question is about that women should not be in the combat areas. All other places where women have been permitted in the army, they have been doing all that. And even in our case, the SSC women officers have been posted in those combat positions as well. So the resistance to extending the SSC to permanent commission is only based on stereotypical images and our stereotypical understanding of the roles women have to do. So again, another mention where I said that family responsibilities are more important for women, whether the woman wants it or not, but we are taking care of you, that you will have conflict and therefore we are relieving you. But once it was opened up, once the corps have been opened up for women, then what is the rationale to say after 24 years, no, after 14 years, you can't take more? And we will not train you more because you will have very few years left. So we'll be wasting our resources. The women are saying you are wasting your resources. In any case, for 14 years, you trained us, and then you are wasting your resources by letting us go. So certainly an important case, a landmark step on that direction, that recognizing that how stereotypical images of who women are. Women are soft, caring, weak. So all that has got reinforced in the manner in which these policies have been made. So certainly the policy have to be, so the judges refer to this article in the Constitution and say that this has to be the, what was that, section 30, article 30. So it says, proper discharge of their duties, so as to ensure proper discharge of their duties. So there was nothing the government could put forward to say that why do we say that after 14 years they will not be able to discharge their duties. So it's violating this provision here as well, because the policy has to be you can make a policy, but policy has to be within the contours of the Constitution. And the question is that the criteria is that you can make distinction to ensure proper discharge of their duties. The stereotypical images do not fulfill that condition. So, what are the directions? Can we have a quick look at the directions? Well, in fact, given the time, you should look at that yourself. We can actually look at the next case, Kirti.
Ma'am, day before yesterday, there was a very important development regarding this case in the Supreme Court. I've shared that article, live law article on the classroom. They
Mm-hmm.
where it was challenged that why women officers are not being inducted into the National Defense Academy. So
Mm-hmm.
the argument of the Solicitor General, ASG, was
Mm-hmm.
that the women officers on the date of that induction, after they
Mm-hmm.
have completed 14 years, they have to
Mm-hmm.
be in shape 1. Shape 1 means the shape in which they were at that time when they inducted into the army. And for their male counterparts, it was that shape 1 would be on the day then when they were inducted into the army, but not after they have attained 14 years and are eligible for promotions.
Mm-hmm.
So women had to maintain shape 1
Yeah.
if they were to get permanent commissions after those
Mm-hmm.
14 years in SSC.
Yeah. So in 14
Uh,
years, as a start, one is a discrimination for the two.
mm,
Even though men have got no reason to lose their shape, they can lose their shape and be still qualified.
yeah.
And
So,
women may lose shape because of pregnancy and childbirth. They must still go back to their original one. So very
yeah.
apparently discriminatory.
This is also Justice Chandrachud judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
I didn't see that. Thank you for that.
yeah.
Good. So last case, Kirti.
Ma'am, the facts of this case are that uh, there were an husband and a wife, uh, Vinod and Poonam. So they died in a accident, motorbike accident, and with them also died a child which was there in Poonam's womb, and they had two children, I think one daughter and one son, 4 or 5 years of age, and two grandparents left behind. So they had claimed motor accident compensation from the person that caused the accident. So the tribunal had given them the compensation of 40.71 lakh rupees. The
Mm-hmm.
High Court deducted it to 22 lakhs. The Supreme Court gave it 33.2 lakhs. So basically, the High Court, they said that the compensation would be calculated on the basis of the minimum wage for a unskilled laborer, for both of them, for the husband and the wife. So
Mm-hmm.
it would be calculated on the basis of unskilled workers minimum wage in Delhi. But later it was argued in the Supreme Court that they were not in Delhi. They could not prove, the husband could not prove his job in Delhi. So since they were basically domiciled in Haryana, so
Mm-hmm.
the Supreme Court granted the minimum wage of a skilled worker to the husband and the minimum wage of a unskilled worker to the wife, Poonam.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Justice Suryakant delivered this judgment, and although the other Justice N.V. Ramanna, he said that I concur with the judgment of Justice Suryakant, but
Mm-hmm.
he said that there could be three different ways in which we could calculate the compensation for a house wife.
Mm-hmm.
Because if a person is earning, we can easily calculate the compensation. If a person is in a position, in a job where the job is not provable, it cannot be verified, then also we can ascertain by looking at the nature of the job, their lifestyle. But it would be difficult for ascertaining compensation for housewives. So Justice Ramanna said that the housewife, he said all that thing, that they also are very important for the economic, as far the economic aspect is concerned, and also they contribute very much to the household. So he
Mhm.
said that three ways in which the compensation could be calculated was one was uh, where the compensation could be half of what the husband is earning. Secondly, the uh, just get let me get to that paragraph. There were three different terms for that. Yeah. So first is the opportunity lost model, where we calculated from by seeing that if she had got that opportunity, what she would have earned. So then we can calculate the compensation. And
Mhm.
secondly, the partnership method, where the homemaker salary is valued at half her husband's salary. And the
Mhm.
third one is the replacement method. If we replace the work contributed by the housewife with a maid or a domestic servant, and what
Mhm.
we give to that maid would be the basis for the compensation for that housewife. So, although he says that he concurs with the judgment of Justice Surikant, I believe that somehow he believes the compensation of calculation of the compensation should be different from what Justice Surikant has done.
Yeah, but neither his dissenting
Hmm.
nor his all the statements which he has made has impacted the judgment. So, what is the importance of this opinion he has given separately?
That's just an obiter dicta. It does not impact the final outcome of the judgment.
So, what do you think would have been, when you look at this actual table they have created? What I've not understood in the table, if you are better off than me, they have the table on page 4: monthly income, tribunal, high court, Supreme Court, then deduction, age multiplier, adjustment, increase for special circumstances, funeral charges. So in this one, when you look at the Supreme Court, which has looked at, you rightly pointed out that Haryana Minimum Wages Act, and because he was, I think he was treated as semi-skilled, not skilled worker. He was treated as semi-skilled, Poonam as unskilled. So you have that differentiation. Then there is this 25% Poonam, which is increased for special circumstances. I've not worked out, I've not been able to still find out why was that increase not counted for Vinod. Why it was counted only for, in fact, it was not counted at all for either by tribunal. It was counted for women by the High Court, has been counted for women by the Supreme Court also. But I've not been able to understand why this increase has been there in her case, increase for special circumstances. Um, so that's one query I have, and for which I do not have an answer. But certainly, what has been present at the table is that there were certain cases where it was said that previously her work was treated as unskilled, then it was treated as semi-skilled, but this is not what we are finding in this judgment. She has still been treated as an unskilled worker. So that's so again, this is said to be, this was all over in the newspapers. This was all over the newspapers for what reason? For the obiter of the Supreme Court, or for something which actually women have achieved in this judgment? So whether this obiter given by Ramanna, may not have helped at all in this case, but whether, because we say the obiter also are persuasive. So whether all these reasons or the alternatives which have been given by Ramanna, different ways we can calculate the incomes, or we have been is being calculated in different parts of the world, whether that will be of any use, can this be used for getting a better outcome in subsequent cases? Why do you say no, Saloni?
Ma'am, means I'm still analyzing, but I don't have a very firm answer to this, quick fix answer. But I'm not feeling right.
So suppose the option that she can get 50% of what the husband earns. I find that very problematic
Me too, ma'am.
because why?
Ma'am, then we are like we are measuring the worth of a woman from the income of their husband. So again, like this sounds not good to hear.
Yeah, no, for me, the whole question is that when you look at wives' work, it is the same whether you are CEO's wife or you are a laborer's wife, of providing for the family, caring for the family, looking after the family's interests. This is what all housewives who are not earning. It's not that the earning wives are not doing the same things. So this is expected of them, and this is what most of them do. So then why, how, when you translate it into money, why should it be the nature of work of the husband which should determine what is the worth of your work? But then what is the alternative? We object to that. Then what is the alternative? How do we measure a woman's work in the household when she dies? Should she be treated toward the other way, that independent of the husbands? We can say, okay, what is the nature of the work women do? They do the work without not necessarily with the educational qualifications and degrees and doctorates, but whether the work they do is really unskilled worker, unskilled work. So, what is the meaning we give to the word skill? Whether skill is only that which you get, for which you have a degree, skill which you acquire by doing certain things, these are not skill. Whether making chapatis is a skill, making vegetables, cooking is a skill, whether negotiating, mediating between different warring members in the family, is that a skill? So she is a mediator. She is a finance manager. She is certainly the laborer in the house. So she has got very multiple roles, and many of them require a lot of psychological understanding, lot of skills of negotiation and mediation without which they don't exist. So whether all those skills, because there's not a certificate, not to be counted in the loss the family will suffer when she goes. So the love and affection with which she does, and she's expected to give all these services. So come back to the advertisement we saw for the cards, the job which says, this is in home, to demand of her things which, and she does it without demand because she thinks also this is expected of me. So with all that work, then what will be the most appropriate method to determine what is her work worth?
I think the two models Justice N.V. Ramanna talked about can be the opportunity loss model and the replacement model. So if we replace that work with another person, how much worth in monetary terms would it be? And if we would have given that opportunity to her to go out and work, how much she could have contributed in monetary terms?
What will be the problem? We adopted the opportunity loss method. First, we do not send them to school. Then we say you have been at opportunity loss because you were not educated. So you could have worked as a maybe as a laborer, which you didn't. Doesn't work really, no?
Ma'am, that is too that is not very concrete. We have to have so very much of guesswork. If she would have gone to school, if she would have done graduation, if she would have got that job, uh, that is, I think, not a very stable method. Maybe the
That will
replacement
cause a lot
method could
more
be used.
problem. So when you say replacement, then what is, you can do one counting, okay, how much I would have paid for cooking, for cleaning, for washing, for nursing. But what about love and affection? That is irreplaceable. So, the same goes for loss of limbs also. Loss of limbs are also quantified. But there has to be some system whereby we do recognize, apart from the replacement in terms of services, in terms of our contribution to the family life, to the happiness of the family. So the heads in replacement will have to be worked out very carefully. Unless we do that, then it's okay. So your worth was okay. I am paying to my maid 5,000 rupees per month. So if I die, whatever I'm paying to the maid, that is the only expense. So in my neighborhood, suppose somebody is paying 5,000 rupees to the maid who does all this work of cleaning, blah blah blah, and maybe you can add occasional um, illness and therefore nursing and caring work. But apart from that, the fact of supervision of the children when they go to school or come back from the school and when they do their homework, the thousand things. How do you actually implement the replacement model in the context of women's work in the houses? So somewhere we are also, Ramana also mentions about when they're counting GDP, all the work which the women do at home is counted as non-economically productive work. So lots of things have to change before their work can be recognized as economically productive work. So it's not only that we talk about this work only when somebody has died, even when they're alive. If we are able to quantify their contribution, then it is easier to talk about matrimonial property. At this point of time, women are still saying that I should have a share in the matrimonial property. And you think, oh, how can you ask? All the money I earned, I got this money. So if you start talking in terms of what is her contribution worth in the family setup, and not only in the pure economic terms, but also in the well-being. And that was the other thing we were talking about, that when we talk about equal pay for equal work scenario, what is it that we have in mind? Whether we have in mind that who will be the workers in this particular field, what will be their qualifications, whether they will be doing mental work or physical work, or whether we are also talking in terms of what is the value contribution of that work in my life. So whether the contribution of a nurse in a hospital is much less than a doctor, or both of them are equally important for the welfare of the patient. So from the patient's perspective, is the nurse less important than the doctor? And if yes, then how much less? The same way we are asking that the driver in my house and the maid in my house, who brings more solace to me in my living, in my day-to-day activities, rather than saying, what are your educational qualifications? So there are two ways to look at, at the determining salaries for people. We're looking at what are your qualifications? Are you doing menial job? Are you doing a manual job? Are you doing mental work? Or what is your contribution to the country's progress for a certain industry? What role are you playing in a certain situation? So what is the value of your worth in that organization, be it family, be it an enterprise, be it government? So if we change the criteria by reference to which we will determine salary, that may be more equitable, rather than saying, okay, doctors require much more rigorous training, much more expensive training, and therefore doctors will be paid more. We look at from the perspective of the patient. The doctor may be best if he doesn't get good care. Does he think it's a good hospital? If he doesn't get good nursing, what is his experience of the hospital? It's a combination of the two. If one of the two is lacking, he says, no, not a good hospital. So for them, for the patient for whom the hospital is, should it be his experience which determines whether the two will be paid same or different wages? Valuing the valuation and the value they bring to his life in the hospital. So unless we start changing the criteria by reference to which we determine wages, to say men and women should have equal wages is not an answer. So if in the family setup, what the woman brings in terms of care and what the man brings in terms of money, whether one is less than the other or whether they are equally important, and therefore whatever money, whatever comfort we have has to be shared equally. So there is a lot more possibilities once we start recognizing that women's work, the unpaid work, is worth a lot more by referring to different criteria. We may come to different conclusions in terms of determining what is her worth, whether it is compensation, whether it is salary. So I'm ready to stop with that unless you have any observation.
Yeah, ma'am. Also, this case talks about the compensation for a wife. What if in a scenario where there is a widowed mother, and the son is living with his children, with his mother, with his widowed mother, and that son and that mother, they die. So how will we calculate the contribution of that mother? This case talks about the wife. So will we say that no, this case talks about wife and not about mother? So
It may be a sister, it may be an unmarried sister, it may be a divorced
uh,
sister. So I don't think, for me, that the wife, in my understanding, will stand for the woman in the house, whatever be her relationship. So it's not only that it has to be wife for us to talk about this, but whoever is the carer in the house. So the better, and the same may happen. The worst, no, the reverse category also. The wife is earning, the husband is not, but her husband is actually doing the things which a wife usually does. So in that case, we will not give, no, we will say, oh, he was just a man not doing anything. So I think for me, it has to be gender neutral. That whoever, what is the worth of the care work is the question, irrespective of who is providing that care work. Whether it's a wife, whether it's a mother, she may not be necessarily a widowed mother. She may be just a mother also, with the the father also being in the side. So it doesn't matter from my understanding of the situation as to what is his relationship with. In this case, both of them would have died. So Bhagwanti is just the first taught case you would study, where the clock tower fell and the woman died. And I've been asking that question from that point onwards itself. That how do you determine the worth of Bhagwanti? What are the criteria laid down to determine how much her death is? But we don't teach compensation in our tort law. So we can make a reference to that, but we actually do not grapple with the subject. It is important to discuss that question. If only the woman dies, any woman who dies or any carer who dies, what is the worth of her work? So somewhere putting more premium onto education and qualifications has resulted into this twisted um, compensation or salary structures. So between men and women doing the same work, we have made a law and the equality achieved. But if they're doing different kind of work, then should you force them to do the similar work? Or can we still create equitable working conditions for people who are doing different kinds of things? And that question, the very structure by which we determine salaries of the board members, salaries of the workers, salaries of the menial labor, the salary of the manual labor, the salary of the skilled worker and the semi-skilled workers. And semi-skilled and skilled workers are all about education and training in certain areas. So opportunities for them not available, sometimes because of the gender role, sometimes because of the limitations of the gender roles. So certainly there's a lot more to think about in restructuring. What we do is we do tinker. यहाँ से चलो इसको इतना उठा दो, इसको उतना मास उठा दो. But we are not looking at the structures which has created these disparities.
Ma'am, even biased is in the policy also. Like policy, for example, the Matru Vandana Yojana, like which is provided for the poor woman to take care during the pregnancy to take medicine. They government provide around 5,000 rupees to take medicine or like some fruit or nutrition, but they also provide just for the two child. It is kind of birth control policy, more and less than like maternity, like
True.
betterment.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can't take one maternity leave after two children.
yeah. So it is like कि आप एक साइड पॉलिसी बना रहे हो ताकि आप वुमेन का केयर कर सको, और आफ्टर टू चाइल्ड उसकी डेथ होती है क्या होती है, डोंट केयर, यू आर नॉट प्रोवाइडिंग एनी मेडिसिन और एनी काइंड ऑफ हेल्प थ्रू एनी पॉलिसी. सो दैट इज वेरी ऑर्थोडॉक्स.
This is kind of trying to, what is that called? Kill two birds with one stone. You are getting lots of praise for looking after the woman, ignoring the fact that you are actually not looking after the woman. You are trying to boost your population control measures. So that not the fact that you will be denied to have panchayat seat, You can't take so many things if you have got more than two children. And our decision making process tells us that women do not have control over their own bodies. So that is a double whammy. Neither their families support the independence of their bodies or decision making processes, nor the government recognizes that limitation. It thinks, it's when imposing those rules, it says women are in an equal negotiating position to negotiate how many children they will have. So by that imposing those categories, for more important for you is the population control than the woman's experience of life of not having control over their own bodies or on reproductive rights. So certainly, that's where the questioning has to come on the very structuring of the system. The structuring is still based on criteria other than women's experiences in life. That's what we constantly keep repeating ourselves in this course. Becoming aware of that is important.
One of the most interesting facts just I got on the website of international level organization, ma'am, it says that in India 80% of the unpaid care work is done by women, and only 7.8% is done by men, and which is equal to like 31 minutes, and in Pakistan it is like 28 minutes of care work.
Yeah. These figures are there for all of us to see. But what is the consequence of that is the question. This information is there for the whole world. This comparative studies how much care work men do, and the short documentary we saw, how much is the woman's worth. Where were those figures again for different countries? So we know this, but but I think drawing our attention to such facts make us more aware of what's happening actually, because there is one thing which seems superficially that this is the scenario. But once you get the critical eye, then you can make connections and think of alternative arguments. Otherwise, the same should be always ठीक है, महिला है, कुछ कमा तो रही नहीं थी, इतना दे रहे हैं. No, we are not saying she will not be entitled to anything, even though she has not been doing any paid work. Even the unskilled worker does something, but she doesn't do anything. She has never earned even a single penny. So therefore, we are giving her something. That may be one attitude towards giving compensation to her on her death. But we are questioning that why is her work classified as unskilled work? It's not even a semi-skilled work, it's a properly skilled work, and skilled work of a multiple disciplines. Psychology, sociology, mathematics, finance, mediator, negotiator, apart from being a perfect chef and housekeeper. So this is all that is not taken note of. And this judgment also, in fact, in that sense, it kind of opens up the possibility of a debate. The judgment itself does not do anything on that line, but it opens up the sphere for conversation, that there are different ways, and maybe some other time we'll have majority of the judges agreeing with what Ramana is saying and actually applying what Ramana has said. That's the birth of that judgment. So, okay, we stop today. We meet on Monday to take up Me Too, I think, or Sexual Harassment Act, and Me Too. We can take about that. In Sexual Harassment Act, we want to understand what is the difference between Sexual Harassment Act and the offense of sexual harassment under IPC. Whether both of them are talking about the similar things or different things. And what is the importance of Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act for a working woman? What are the limitations of that also? How is the workplace defined? Where are the women working and whether it is covering all the areas where women are working? So that's the kind of conversation we would want to have on Monday. Okay? Let's stop.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.